In the mud of Normandy, the Axis butchers thought their warrior spirit would be enough to hold back the tide. But everything changed during a quiet talk in a prisoner camp. It was the moment Germany realized it could not win the war. A captured German officer looked at his American guards and asked one simple, shocking question. "Where are your horses?" These totalitarian thugs had been told the United States was weak, but as they watched miles of American trucks streaming past, they realized a terrifying truth. While the Axis monsters were still using millions of horses to pull their supplies, the United States had quietly erased the animal from the battlefield. It was not just a win, it was an industrial execution. But what was the secret American forge that allowed a nation of car builders to move a whole civilization across a continent while the German army was left to starve in the dirt? And how did one simple truck shatter the heart of the Third Reich? Berlin's propaganda machine worked overtime to project an image of unstoppable might. Newsreels showed columns of panzers rolling through shattered cities, banners snapping over tight formations, and officers saluting in crisp, choreographed unison. The world was meant to see a Reich powered by steel and speed, a war machine forged in the fires of modernity. But the camera never strayed far from the parade ground. It never followed the convoys that mattered, the ones snaking through the mud, past burning villages and frozen forests, loaded not with fuel drums or ammunition crates, but with hay bales, veterinary kits, and the exhausted bodies of horses. Strip away the myth, and the truth stands naked. The Wehrmacht was a relic, its arteries clogged with animals. Quartermaster records and prisoner interrogations tell the story the newsreels refused to show. At the height of Hitler's war, the German army counted on 2.75 million horses and mules to haul its guns, wagons, and wounded. Every infantry division required between 2,600 and 6,000 animals just to function. The mathematics of defeat was written in hoofprints. For every tank that thundered forward, 100 teams of horses dragged food, shells, and fodder through the muck. By 1944, more than 1 million horses were still in service across collapsing fronts. Meanwhile, American logistics officers studied these images with cold detachment. They saw the enemy's fantasy and measured it against the evidence: endless lines of wagons, farriers hammering shoes, veterinarians tending to colic and disease. Nothing could conceal the logistical rot. The German war effort wasn't driven by engines, it was shackled to the past. The Reich's mythmakers had conjured a modern army, but its real power moved at the pace of the 19th century, and no amount of propaganda could erase the sound of hooves in retreat. Every day, the Wehrmacht's lifeline was measured not in fuel drums, but in hay and hoofbeats. A single German infantry division on campaign demanded 53 tons of fodder each day just to keep its animals alive. That is not ammunition, not rations for men, just food for horses. Multiply that burden across hundreds of divisions, and the numbers become merciless. The army's supply columns crawled forward, their pace dictated by the stomachs of animals. Railheads could feed them only so far. Beyond that, the army's reach collapsed under its own weight. Quartermasters tracked the endless flow of oats and barley, always one bad week of weather away from disaster. Behind the front, another army toiled in silence. 37,000 farriers hammered out shoes, while 236 veterinary companies moved from village to village, treating more than 100,000 horses every day. These men patched up wounds, set broken legs, and fought outbreaks of colic and disease. Their reports read like battlefield dispatches, casualties, recoveries, deaths. On a good day, they could save 3 out of every 4 stricken animals. Yet every lost horse meant a wagon abandoned, a gun left behind, a meal not delivered to the men at the front. No parade ground ever showed the scale of this hidden struggle. The German army's fighting edge dulled with every mile its horses staggered through mud or froze in the Russian winter. The cost was measured in wasted energy, lost time, and the morale of soldiers forced to march beside dying animals. The engine army waiting over the horizon would never face this drag. For the Wehrmacht, the old world's burden was inescapable, an anchor that would pull the Reich down no matter how many banners flew over its columns. The American answer to the century's greatest war was built not in secret bunkers or on parade grounds, but on the factory floors of Detroit, Cleveland, and South Bend. The 2.5-ton truck, known to its makers and drivers as the Deuce, rolled out of assembly lines by the hundreds of thousands, forged in the roar of stamping presses and the sweat of machinists who worked in 3 shifts, 7 days a week. GMC engineers sketched the first blueprints in 1939, chasing a vision of a truck that could carry 5,000 pounds across mud, snow, and shattered bridges. By 1941, the Army had ordered over 800,000 of these machines, each one a steel promise of mobility. The numbers defy belief. GMC alone delivered more than 500,000 Deuces, their olive-drab bodies stretching in endless columns across the docks of New Jersey and the wharves of Liverpool. International Harvester added another 100,000, shipping them west to the Pacific, while Studebaker's assembly lines in Indiana sent nearly 200,000 more thundering east, bound for Russia's frozen roads. The Soviets called every big truck a Studebaker for years after the war, a tribute to the avalanche of American steel that buried the Wehrmacht's hopes on the Eastern Front. Each Deuce was a marvel of standardization, with 3 driven axles, a 4.4-liter engine, and 6 wheels clawing for traction on roads where horses would founder and die. The trucks hauled ammunition, fuel, wounded men, and bread, 10,000 pounds at a time on paved roads, 5,000 off-road, and always more when the need was desperate. Variants rolled off the line as tankers, ambulances, and mobile workshops. In all, the United States produced nearly 2.4 million trucks of all types during the war, a mechanical tsunami that erased the old logic of supply. Where the Reich's armies bled energy into the mud, America's industrial army executed a new kind of campaign, one measured not in miles of advance, but in the relentless arithmetic of production. The Deuce became the backbone of the motorized sledgehammer, the engine that buried the myth of German invincibility beneath mountains of steel and rubber. The Red Ball Express did not just deliver supplies, it erased the old world from the battlefield. 6,000 trucks, painted with a bold red circle, thundered day and night across the ruined roads of France. They formed an unbroken artery of steel and rubber, pumping life into the Allied advance while the German army starved for movement. Every 24 hours, these convoys dropped 12,000 tons of fuel, ammunition, rations, and spare parts at the front, enough to feed the hunger of entire armies. The numbers were not theory. They were arithmetic, executed with the precision of a factory line. Convoy logs from the Transportation Corps read like battle reports, columns stretching for miles, headlights cutting through the black, engines roaring through mud and mortar craters. The drivers, many of them African-American soldiers from segregated battalions, worked in rotating teams, swapping out behind the wheel without ever letting the engine cool. They drove for 83 straight days, sleeping in their cabs, eating cold rations, and watching the odometer climb into the tens of thousands. The trucks themselves became weapons, neutralizing distance and weather with brute mechanical force. The Red Ball's avalanche could not be stopped by roadblocks or air raids. If a bridge fell, engineers threw up a Bailey span in hours. If a truck broke down, a mobile repair crew swapped engines on the shoulder. Spare parts flowed as fast as bullets. Fuel tankers rolled in behind the cargo haulers, filling the tanks of Shermans and Jeeps, while maintenance trucks patched the wounded and kept the column moving. The system did not pause, it did not break. It executed the logic of victory, crushing the enemy's hope with every ton delivered. In this storm of steel, the old world supply chain vanished. Where the Wehrmacht's lifeline collapsed in mud and fodder, the American machine buried it beneath an avalanche of throughput, leaving only silence and hoofprints in the rearview mirror. In the National Archives and Records Administration, a reel of prisoner of war interrogations sits labeled by date and camp. Among the routine exchanges, one voice cuts through. A German officer, captured after the collapse of his unit's supply lines in France, speaks. The tape hisses, then steadies. His accent is sharp, his words deliberate. He asks, not with defiance, but with the brittle confusion of a man who has seen the world overturned. "Where are your horses?" There is a pause. The American guard, perhaps puzzled, answers simply, "We don't use horses." Silence stretches. The German's breath catches, the question hanging in the air. This is not the silence of surrender, but of doctrine shattering. For years, the Wehrmacht's command staff had measured power in divisions, in tanks, in the ironclad logic of the general staff. But here, in a muddy tent behind the front, the arithmetic of the old world collapses. The officer's world, built on columns of horses, on the steady rhythm of hooves and the daily grind of fodder, has been erased by a system he cannot comprehend. The date on the tape reads August 1944. By then, the Allied advance had become a mechanical flood. The Red Ball Express was roaring day and night, delivering 12,000 tons of supplies every 24 hours, while the German army, still shackled to 1.1 million horses, watched its lifeline disintegrate. The officer's question is more than a logistical inquiry, it is the moment the myth of German invincibility dies. No parade, no banner, no last stand. Just the sound of a man realizing that everything he believed about war, about power, about victory, has already been deleted by the engine army. The tape clicks off. The silence is final. The German high command watched the front lines grind to a halt, not from lack of courage, but from a collapse in movement. The numbers told a story that no propaganda could spin. Veterinary loss reports from the Eastern Front in 1941 and 1942 counted 179,000 horses dead, frozen, starved, or shattered by artillery. Each loss was a break in the chain. A wagon left to rot, a cannon abandoned in the mud, a ration cart stranded within sight of hungry men. Every day, quartermasters calculated the distance from the railhead, 25 miles. Beyond that, the supply line withered. Trucks could cross rivers and cratered roads, but a horse could not eat mud or march on empty. The Wehrmacht's reach was shackled to the daily limits of animal endurance. German logisticians recorded the spiral in their own memos. One after-action report captured by Allied intelligence reads less like a military plan and more like an obituary for mobility. Losses among draft animals now threaten the continued supply of the front. Veterinary reserves exhausted. By autumn 1944, attrition had become a death sentence for entire divisions. Interrogations of captured quartermasters revealed a grim pattern. Units cut off from fodder collapsed within days. The horses died first, then the men surrendered. No amount of tactical brilliance could bridge the gap between a 19th century supply chain and a 20th century battlefield. The American system, built for speed and scale, deleted these limits. Trucks rolled from factory to front without pause, erasing the very problems that had paralyzed the enemy. German commanders, reading loss reports and watching their lines fracture, understood the truth. The war was no longer a contest of strategy, but a test of throughput. The engine army had buried the horse, and with it, the last hope of German victory. The American system was built for one purpose: to move, supply, and sustain an army at a tempo the world had never seen. Every United States infantry division, every armored spearhead, every artillery battalion was driven by the logic of total motorization. Not a single American soldier in Europe waited for a wagon or a hay bale. The blueprint was absolute, 100% motorized. Trucks, jeeps, tank transporters, and fuel convoys were synchronized by planners who measured victory in cubic yards and gallons per mile. By 1944, the War Department's after-action reports read like the logbooks of a machine. The Red Ball Express thundered for 83 days without pause until November 16th, when the last convoy stood down and the railroads took over. In that window, the United States Army executed a logistical operation at a scale that erased the old world from the battlefield. Every day, columns of deuces and tankers erased the tyranny of distance, delivering fuel, food, and ammunition to the point of contact. There was no pause, no retreat, no rationing of movement. The American advance was not a surge but a relentless current, powered by steel and gasoline, indifferent to weather, mud, or the enemy's last hope. The German command watched as every calculation of recovery was buried under the certainty of throughput. The engine army would not stop. Standardization was the secret code written into every American machine. On the battlefield, it meant that a broken axle or shattered gearbox was not a crisis, but a solved equation. A truck limped into a roadside depot, and within hours, sometimes minutes, a replacement part slid into place, stamped from the same dies as 100,000 others. Field mechanics worked from manuals thicker than Bibles, but every bolt, every gasket, every hose was a known quantity. The doctrine was absolute. If it broke, it could be fixed, anywhere, anytime, by anyone with the right wrench. This was not luck or improvisation. It was the American system, executed with the cold certainty of arithmetic. In 1944, the Army's field maintenance units restored 90% of disabled vehicles to service within days. Spare engines, transmissions, even whole truck beds traveled forward in relays, stacked in supply dumps from Normandy hedgerows to the Rhine. The enemy fought attrition with horses and hope, and America met it with catalog numbers and crates. Attrition itself became meaningless. Where the Reich's losses were final, a dead horse, a ruined wagon, a supply column erased forever, the Americans simply replaced what was lost. The mechanical tsunami did not pause to mourn or tally. It rolled forward, erasing the old world's limits, flooding every front with the logic of repair and replacement. In the end, the question was not who fought harder, but whose system could outlast disaster. The answer was written in steel, oil, and the unbroken chain of parts that made defeat a certainty. The moral question faded beneath the roar of the engine army. In the age of the machine, spirit alone could not hold back the flood. Today, every modern army lives or dies by its supply chain math. The industrial engine, 2.4 million trucks, 12,000 tons a day, did not just supply victory. It deleted any hope of Axis triumph. Logic, not legend, buried the old world. In war, the future always erases the past, ruthlessly without nostalgia. The lesson endures. The system wins. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts below.